A perfect example of failure of men's rights here in North America. There's a reason why it is succeeding in Japan and South Korea and failing in the Western Hemisphere, right? It's because they lack passion and they're not willing to show women as the opposition that they are. So, silencing men's silencing men, censorship of men's rights activists. This channel, mensnet TV, the oldest video is 16 years old. So it's been around forever. But this is the latest video, 4 years ago. So they just gave up, right? Because they try and play by their rules. Now we'll get into it and you'll see what I'm talking about. Censorship in media and where we go to next. Well, this is a 4-year-old video, so I guess they don't go anywhere. They leave.
Welcome to mensnet, sort of. My name is Mel Fight, and as you can probably see, I am not in the mensnet television studio. Actually, they closed our studio in 2011, and we have been out of production since. But I know we still have subscribers to this channel, so I thought I'd post a video just to let you know what we've been doing, and more importantly, what we're planning to do next.
Well, you haven't been doing shit, dude. That's why you don't even have 1,000 subscribers. My channel's twice your size, and my channel's being suppressed by YouTube.
So let me just start by saying that even though mensnet has been out of production, the National Center for Men is still in existence, and although we are not nearly as visible as we used to be, we still run a counseling service that helps.
Well, whose fault is that? How come you guys aren't protesting in the street? In Japan, men are actually fighting women off physically to protect their rights. And it gets shown on the news. What are you laydowns doing?
Hundreds of men and their families every year. It is a unique and a valuable and an important service.
There you go. Men and their families. Families equate to women. So the people who are against you, you're trying to corral them and beg them to be on your side. Doesn't work. Didn't work in the 1970s or the 80s or the 90s. So here you are, still haven't learned.
And I'm proud of it, and that continues. So,
You're proud of this failure.
um, having said that, we decided in 2018 that we wanted to try to get back on television, and so we accepted an invitation from Reuters, the news service that distributes videos to hundreds of television stations around the United States and internationally. And Reuters asked if they could video a discussion group that we have in Yorktown Heights, New York, which is where mensnet was taped. And they specifically asked if we would talk about how gender politics influences politics in general, which is an interesting topic. And, we want.
Is it interesting or is it an important topic? You're a men's rights activist, right? So it's an important topic.
To talk about it. So we told them to come on up, and they showed up with a reporter, producer, camera crew. For our part, we had all the old mensnet regulars there: Tony Nazzaro, Roy Barreca, Steve Metzger, Paula Young. We had some old NCM guys there and some new people. We had a couple of elected officials, including the former supervisor of Yorktown Township. We had liberals and conservatives in that room. Paula was on fire about presenting a feminist point of view.
Wow. So some guy was on fire to show a hate group's point of view, right? And you are not on fire. A you are a cold stone, and you wonder why you don't get anyone supporting you. The winners are the ones who kick up a stink, and you're wearing deodorant.
So we had an intense discussion, and we covered a lot of territory. We talked, for example, about what do liberal men do now? Seriously, I mean, if you're a progressive man, how do you vote? You can't vote for Democrats, I don't think. I think the Democratic Party has essentially become a political arm of the National Organization for Women.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And they're not progressive, they're regressive.
Can't vote for Republicans. Republicans are hostile to basic New Deal style progressive policies.
Yeah, they're aggressive to men. You got to be able to frame this properly. They're they're hostile to men. Both sides. So you can see you're fighting human nature. That's why the left-right politics has to be left behind.
What do you do? It's a problem. I'm not sure we found any good answers to that problem, but we
Well, you look at South Korea. Since all these young men were willing to work together, young men, they didn't bother trying to bring their wives into it or their girlfriends. And they found a politician and they put their money where their mouth is. And they said, we are willing to support you, talk for our issues. That's what you have to do. And you've got to leave your families, that is your wives, behind. You've got to leave your opposition behind.
did have a good discussion about it. Um, we talked about whether it's ever okay to vote for a candidate simply because of the candidate's sex. I mean, can you decide you're voting only for women or for men? You know,
Yeah, yes, you can, dude. Because every time I see a female politician get into office or work to get into office, she tells you outright that she's against men's best interest. Kamala Harris, she was what? Talking about abortion rights, which really means enslavement of men, because she wasn't getting rid of child support, was she? So yes, you want to vote for men, but particular kind of men, men that you have actually gained in contact with and have told you that they are on your side. You're willing to put your money and support behind them, then they'll owe you that.
does the gender of a public official make that much of a difference in the performance of the office? We talked about the Me Too movement and its effect on politics and relationships. And I think that I got politic and
No, 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 not Me Too hasn't affected relationships. Relationships are what they are. Me Too is just a symptom of what relationships are. So you got the framing wrong again. You got the cart before the horse. So failure number two.
concede that Me Too has hurt women as well as men.
There you go. Misframing number three. You're begging now. It's not hurting women. It works in women's favor. And that's why women support it. So you're doing this old false equivalence. Oh, if you're fighting for your interests, that's what you got to do. You got to leave someone else behind. You can't say, I'm not important, but it might affect these other people who are important. If women are the important ones, then why should people care about men at all? I don't care about you because you don't have any self-respect. You don't have any self-regard.
Um, and we talked about the military draft. You know, that's still relevant here. Tony is a Vietnam vet. He had some things to say about this, as did others. I think it's important for people to tell the truth about their own experiences. And then, if other people don't want to acknowledge that truth, that's their privilege. But I think each person,
It's their privilege not to acknowledge a truth. What piss poor framing this is. No, they don't have a privilege for that. They're anti-truth. They're the bad guys and have to be called out.
should bear witness to his or her own truth. And so, for me, at least when I was growing up, the truth is that the only people in the United States who had the right to vote were women. I mean, I understand everyone thinks, obviously, men also had the right to vote. Um, it's not true. I can tell you, as a young man, if I wanted the right to vote, I first had to register with Selective Service, which was a dangerous thing to do. Had I not registered with Selective Service, I would have been a convicted felon, or a fugitive from justice, or living in exile. I would not have been voting in U.S. elections.
Exactly. So you live in a caste system. And that's the way it's been since 1920. Well, actually, it's always been that way. Women have always had privileges over men. They never had to go to war. But officially, it would have been 1920 in the United States when women got the right to vote. They didn't have to give anything up. And yet, men like you had to sign up. So it's been over 100 years now that men have been officially in this caste system as opposed to unofficially.
About 60,000 men of my generation never really got the right to vote because, they didn't make it out alive. So I think it's fair, and I think it's
What's the point of voting then? I mean, you can't vote when you're a corpse, right?
reasonable for men of my age to ask female candidates of our age, what did you do in the war? They ask that question of men all the time. It should be
The thing is, guys, it shouldn't be only war veterans that get rights anyway. You guys, you're not protecting me or your citizens. You're stealing from other men. You're killing other men from other countries, taking their stuff and giving it to the rich people in your country. That's what you're doing as a vet. There shouldn't be any special privileges to that.
okay for us to ask it of women. What did you do in the war? Did you enlist? Because we could have.
It doesn't matter if women are enlist. They're never going to be put in the front lines. So it's neither here nor there.
Did you did you protest against the? Maybe you went to jail. Maybe you went to jail to try to protect men, to save men, to prevent them from being drafted.
Well, they didn't, right? And they never did. So they are the class enemy of ours. Women are the class enemy of men. And this is why you fail over and over again, right? You can't come, that's the first thing you have to come to terms with and act on that. Because that's what the South Korean men are doing. That's what the Japanese men are doing.
You know, maybe you even gave up your spot in college so that some man could have a desperately needed and potentially life-saving student deferment, which you did not need.
Well, what can I say, dude? They got the privileges and they're enjoying them. They're not going to give that up. What you are begging people who are your enemy, right? This is why men's issues exist, is because of the opposite sex. And you're begging them. I mean, this is retarded. It's like black men or Jewish men going to the KKK and saying, your hatred of us affects you too. Maybe you should give something up. It's like, oh my God.
Or maybe you fought for women's rights when men were being dragged off to die. What did you do
There's no maybe about that. That's exactly what happened.
in the war, Hillary Clinton? What did you do in the war, Elizabeth Warren? These are fair questions. We have a right to ask them. And we have a right to factor in the answers when we make our choices about who to vote for.
But you already know the answers. So why would you ask these stupid rhetorical questions?
So we had a provocative discussion. And
Wouldn't it be a debate? Because they are against you having rights.
when it was over, the Reuters producer came over to me and he paid me what I think was the highest compliment he could have paid under the circumstances. He said, "You folks put on a very thoughtful presentation." And I knew then we were in trouble. I knew it. I could feel it. Thoughtful. You know, the people.
Yeah, yeah, it is sneaky language, isn't it? It's like when you make a point about men's rights and someone says interesting. As soon as they say the word interesting, I know how they think. Right.
People who were in that room, we'd all had a lot of experience. Collectively, we had hundreds of television shows to our credit.
Yeah.
We knew enough about how to put on a mostly edit-proof presentation. That is to say, you assume that the people who are recording you might want to edit you in a way that will make you look bad. So you
Really? So you're playing by their rules. You're playing a game knowing that they are going to cheat. So you have no way of winning in this arena. So you're just going out, laying yourself out to slaughter. And this should tell you something, dude, Fiat or Fet, or however your name is, that Reuters is against men's rights. And it's not just Reuters. Feminism is in control of all mainstream media. And so that's why, again, South Korea, the young men, they just went directly to politicians. They didn't waste their times like you are.
don't give them that opportunity. You stay on message, focused, disciplined. We were rehearsed. We knew what we were doing. And I think we succeeded at giving them a mostly edit-proof presentation.
By rights, you shouldn't have to, though. If they're about the truth, they'll just show the whole thing as unedited. So you're admitting these people aren't going to be truthful. Why would you go to them? Why would you play a game you cannot win?
But the Reuters folks outsmarted us. I mean, I have to say it. They did. They outsmarted us.
They outsmarted you. In other words, they cheated. There's no outsmarting this. They have all the power. If your enemies get to cheat, they're going to win.
They figured out the way to edit us was to edit out 100% of everything that we said, which is what they did. They didn't show any of it. Now,
Yeah, that's what I do. My channel's suppressed on YouTube. Very few people get to see it. Right. Right. So that's why this is the best I can do. I'm only a single man. This is why men in the West have to do what men in the East are doing.
I don't know exactly what happened, but I kind of know I sort of know what happened. Something like this, okay? I think the people at Reuters were sitting around trying to figure out what to do, and someone must have said something like, "Why don't we video a bunch of men's rights guys talking about politics? Because they will reveal themselves to be desperately clinging to male privilege. They will look pathetic and foolish. It'll be great television. Everyone's going to want this." Only we didn't get the memo. So, we didn't know to play along. We didn't know to give them pathetic and foolish. So instead, we gave them thoughtful. We gave them smart. We gave them persuasive. I think some people might have been persuaded.
You gave them the truth, right? It's persuasive because it's the truth. That's all you have to do is just say the word truth.
By what we had to say, and evidently Reuters didn't want that, so they didn't use any of it. It felt like content censorship in an extreme form, and coming from a news
It
organization.
didn't feel like it. It is. You got to frame this properly. That it is censorship. And so again, why did you bother going to Reuters then? If you knew they were hostile to you, you can't force them to do anything that makes them look bad and you look good.
Organization like Reuters, it was particularly disturbing. Now, I understand this topic of censorship in the media has been discussed a lot on YouTube. I understand that. But it's an important topic, so please allow me to add my voice. And what I'd like you to know.
Please allow me to add my voice. Again, this is why you are a failure, Mel. Please allow me to add my voice. No, you demand it. You have to demand your rights. You don't ask for them, or in your case, beg for them.
Especially if you're new to the men's movement. If you're young, if you're just starting out, I'd like you to know how the climate that exists now is very different from the climate that existed when I started. I started to do.
Yeah, it got worse, but it was bad enough that you actually started it way back then. And since it's so much worse, it just goes to show you how big of a failure you are. You and the men's rights movement.
Serious mainstream television on men's rights in 1988, 32 years ago. But I remember what it was like. First of all, we didn't have email then, so I could actually get people on the telephone, talk to them. That was better. I remember what it was like to be driven in the car to do the Phil Donahue show for the first time. It felt unreal to me. And I was nervous as hell. I mean, I almost threw up. But I also recall that no one from the Donahue staff suggested to me what I could say or what I couldn't say. I chose my own words.
Of course they didn't, because then there was about controversy. They wanted the drama. So they wanted to give people free rein to say what they want.
And in fact, Donahue was broadcast live in a lot of markets. So the words that I said on his stage were in millions of American homes 6 seconds after I said them. No one could have edited me even if they'd wanted to, and they didn't. A few years later, I was doing a couple of Oprah Winfrey shows on subjects that she despised what I had to say. I knew that. She hated it. She didn't edit out a single word of it. Every single word that I said on her stage made it into the broadcast.
And yet it never made any real effect for men, did it? And even still, they are now exercising to erase a voice, even though your voice doesn't make any difference. That's how much of a class enemy women are to men. Like I said, Donahue, he may not have been on your side, but he was neutral. Oprah Winfrey was 100%. That movie Color Purple she did made the black men look like a bunch of savages. That's what Oprah Winfrey thinks of men in general. It was all about racism, but the black men in the Color Purple movie came out as savages. So it wasn't about race in the end, it was about sex for her.
Even as late as 2013, we were doing Dr. Phil shows back then. I wound up doing that 8 times. And they would sometimes edit that show for time and for pacing. And they often disagreed with what I had to say, but they were very careful when they edited me to make sure that the substance of my remarks remained intact. Everything important that I said on that stage, with just one exception, and I've actually written about this on the National Center for Men website, everything important that I said on that stage made it into the final cut and onto air.
Well, what can I say? You were ineffectual. And because you were, because men, let's face it, are apathetic towards their own rights, things have gotten worse. The feminists have gotten control of everything, and they're shutting down your voice altogether. So you have to change your strategy. You got to look who's actually doing something that works, and you do that.
So, this experience that we recently had with Reuters, this is very different from experiences that we've had previously with television talk show producers, and I do think it represents a dangerous trend that is potentially destructive of democratic values and ideals. And so here's what I would like.
That trend's been going on forever, though. Why'd you form a men's rights movement in the first place? You saw the trend back then. What makes you think the trend is different? But here's another thing. Things have gotten so bad for men now, young men are starting to look for someone. That's why they need to silence the men's rights movement altogether. That's why they allow red pill material content to flood YouTube. They want to push young guys there where they're only going to flounder.
To say about it. If you are an advocate of men's equal rights, you must first and foremost be an advocate of free speech.
No, you first and foremost have to understand that women are the enemy, and you're going to have to actually take rash action. I mean, I should say you're going to take the same actions that other movements that were successful took. You're going to have to take to the streets. You're going to have to force people to see you, and you're going to have to demand your rights and your voice. You aren't demanding anything. All you're doing is trying to play gate to your wives, your girlfriends, who, by the way, support feminists, who are feminist in their heart of hearts. Now, I'm not going to go any further than this. I listened to pretty well the whole thing, but I'm just going to be repeating myself. This is your latest video 4 years ago, and it only has 2.8 thousand views. Geez, I've got videos that are just this big. I have more subscribers than you. I'm a single guy. You represent an organization. How much of a failure can you be?